Hello, it's me, Chris. And
Chris Heim.
And here's Pip.
Pip Heim. Hello, Heim.
And we're here to add the word Heim to words we say for maybe half an hour.
You haven't done it to any of them.
No.
Heim.
There's a royal we, but for you.
Are you my royal legal counsel now?
I guess so. Among other things.
Anyway. Did you want to redo that intro, or do you feel like it reflects...
It's too late now. I'm just going to hug this blanket closer to myself and settle in for night as we talk about a game that we've been getting quite a lot out of in the last few months of lockdown. It's been a while since you and I have sat down to discuss a game that we've both been playing.
Yes, the last time was Animal Crossing again.
Yeah, exactly. Animal Crossing again. But over the last couple of months, we've both, I think, had a kind of a long and evolving relationship with Valheim, as a lot of people have. Obviously, it's been an extremely successful game many people have played. But I haven't returned to talking about it since my early first kind of log cabin building forays into it, as described on the main CNC pod. And we've not had your take on it at all, Pip. So we thought we would take a little bit of time to record a one-off pod special about our adventures in Valheim, or more specifically, Pip's adventures in Valheim and my adventures in retrieving Pip's things from whatever bog she's died in.
Oh, I didn't realise that we would be going there that early.
I didn't realise you keep going back there and need your stuff retrieving.
It was a different bog, and I feel like that makes it a completely separate incident. In fact, this one could hardly be called a bog. It was more of an ocean-standing tree.
Exactly. Well, if it wasn't a bog, why were there so many Draga? These kinds of... litigating these kinds of issues and more in this discussion of Valheim, which will involve, I guess, spoilers for Valheim content. It's not, I know that a lot of people want that sense of discovery, of finding out what content's in the game, particularly, and I feel like we have progressed to the point now where we've pretty much, there are a few things we haven't seen, but we've seen all the biomes, we've been to the edge of the world and seen what's there. And so we will kind of discuss, I guess, the scope, the span of our experience. So if you don't want to hear about stuff, what is in the game past a certain point, then maybe listen to this when you no longer care about that because you've seen it all yourself.
And apologies for everything that we've spoiled before that warning by accident, if we did.
Apologies to anyone for whom the existence of a bog
or death, Heim.
Or indeed, any of it. But yeah, so to give a bit of context, after a few weeks, days, what is time of getting Heim of getting into Valheim, I decided to bite the bullet and set up a server. Pay for server hosting to have a permanent place for myself and my friends to occupy and kind of and to have a Viking life. So you joined, Pip, like a few days in. And when you picked up Valheim, I genuinely didn't know whether it would resonate with you or not. And it really seems to have done. So I'd be interested to know, what about it was that kind of grabbed your, enthusiasm early on.
So I think... this is interesting because So the reason that today's bog death happened was because I thought that you might ask an awkward question like that. So I logged in to try and figure out where I currently am in terms of enjoying the game. Immediately got distracted because I'd actually initially tried to log into my other server that I'm playing with a couple of other friends on that's a lot further behind to make some apology armor because of an incident that happened yesterday that is still in the process of being litigated, I believe, where certain people logged in late and made themselves some rather fetching bronze armor with the bronze that other players had been making through the course of the evening while I had actually been at a Christmas party. Don't ask too many questions about that being in April. Anyway, and then there was a kind of, shall we build some bronze tools tools, and I was a little cagey about the amount of bronze that we might have left at that point in the evening. And then there were, observations made about certain people's incredibly shiny cuirass. And so I thought that if I logged in today and made everyone a set of apology armor, I would no longer be in trouble.
Non grata. I apologise to everyone listening to this. This isn't actually a special podcast about Valheim. It is the trial of Philippa War.
Oh no!
For her apparently assorted Val crimes.
No.
And also I did notice, and I didn't want it to go unremarked, that at the beginning of that answer to a fairly standard question, you attempted to blame me for your most recent bog death, basically somehow pinning it on my broadcasting craft.
Well, no, I thought that, as you are wont to do, you would try and, turn the conversation on me rather than you, and then I would have to answer some questions, and so anyway, so I tried to log in.
What do you like about this video game? Wasn't the hardball that you maybe perceived it to be. You've opened yourself up now, I think, to some great and more searching questions.
I feel like trying to answer a question like, why are you doing that during lockdown, is, a can of worms.
It is, and pointedly though, that isn't the, I just was curious to know because, when you attach to a game, you tend to get really, really deep into them.
I go hard or I go home.
Yeah, you do. And who picks you up and takes you home in the longboat? It's me, Chris.
You had a choice. I would have rescued myself eventually. You like turning up in the longboat.
I do, and we can get to me. But there's... also you said eventually, but you told me.
Oh no.
We need to go find, I've died in the swamp again. You need, I said, do you need some help? You said, maybe. I said,
in the
that
ocean.
Yes. It was a bog in the ocean, but we'll get to that. I get the longboat, I get out there. I have, a new computer now with very far draw distance, so I could see there were like 3 graves. I was like, Pip, did you die more than once?
No, there were 2 graves, and then I accidentally admitted to there being a 3rd death that wasn't recorded in the little corpse markers.
Yeah, and then you died again.
Oh, yeah.
So, I don't know how many corpse markers there would have needed to have been there before you'd retrieved those things. But I will admit, I do like my new role as International Rescue Viking Edition, but...
you weren't that keen on it when we were rafting across that same stretch of water again and again the other day.
Yeah, the other day when you died in a bog in the ocean again.
Different place, different reaning.
There are all roads lead to Seabog. Anyway, so... we don't... I'll give you my perspective then, if you don't want to answer the question. The thing that surprised me was... I got into Valheim, and I think, when I talked about it last in the podcast, I was kind of evenly split between really kind of starting to enjoy the building side of it and log cabin crafting and things like that, and being kind of enamored of its sort of old school RPG exploration and survival stuff. And then as soon as I ended up playing it in a social environment and navigated all of my misgivings about co-op, who knows why I have those, I realized that for me, it's like a building game and like a fundamentally like a kind of, basically, I just really wanted to be the kind of caretaker thing builder who makes sure everyone else has a nice time. And I wasn't sure where you were going to come, what role you are going to define for yourself. But it feels very natural now that what it was like Viking pioneer / kind of roving hero who just returns from some far-off place having slain a distant monster.
It's cat, isn't it?
It is cat. It's cat, and in my case, badger, I guess. I will build set. I'm going to build set, and I will defend the set if I need to, and you just drag corpses back to the front door and say, look what I killed, and introduce all these new materials and crafting trees and things. And I think that's, but it was interesting because, you like other games which are very much about, building up a settlement or kind of, laying down your own base or something like that, or gardening or farming or things. You did some of that.
Yeah.
But predominantly you have been, you've taken to Valheim as a kind of roving exploration game, right?
I think I like being the one that goes out and does the thing, because usually in games, I think, and this is just sort of a broader thing, I've found myself in far more supporting roles or like tending roles or, like upkeep or filling in a space that other people haven't been wanting to fulfill. And in this one, it felt like there was a space open for slightly chaotic Voyager. And I liked that because, because you play quite a lot of games where there's, combat and there's, forward planning and, all of that stuff, like Dark Souls. And I don't like Dark Souls because it's like, what did you learn from that previous encounter? And my answer is usually nothing, And so, but Valheim is not asking me to learn much. It's asking me to get better gear. And I'm like, can do. It's like, can you walk far enough that you have better gear? It's like, yes.
And sometimes, no. And my gear is in the sea now.
Yeah. But mostly, Chris, I can punch dragons to death and trolls and things. So I'm pretty dangerous, but I haven't had to do anything like, for example, using a shield. I still have not done that one time in the game. I've held a shield and I put it down again. I was like, this is for you, Chris.
I like the blocking mechanic.
Mine is still on 0. It has never been higher than 0.
Yeah. It's been really fun because, as we kind of, I think we've hit the point now where I think we undertook our one big voyage to the edge of the world, and I think realised in the course of doing that we started to hit places like the Mistlands, which is an unfinished biome that sort of exists around the edge of the world.
It still managed to creep us out because we weren't sure if it was unfinished, and so we were worried that something would descend from the web-ridden trees.
Yeah.
Riddled, rather, and we would get launched.
But we did not.
No. We were safe, Heim. Yours were all better, and now mine is just weird.
Stop trying to make Heim happen.
I know.
So I think we've kind of started to that. Now it's very much in the kind of make your own fun category. Although that said, we haven't gotten through all the bosses. I'm not really sure how to structure this in terms of our experiences of it, because it has been so much of like exploration and then consolidation. I think is the kind of thing of like, you go out like a cat or a kind of Viking ICBM and just sort of detonate in a region and discover all of the things and new materials and monsters and bits and bobs in a place, and come back with that literal stuff and those stories, and maybe set up a portal or something. And then I arrive, or our friend Paul, who's been playing with us as well, arrives and makes some attempt to kind of consolidate those gains. Me more so, let's be real.
Well, Paul's off building fancy architecture.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Whereas, I mean, I spent a long time on a very fancy piece of architecture and really, really enjoyed that process. But that was also very much an attempt that, like, I'm going to put something practical together. For me, it's like, I feel like...
It wasn't whimsical in any way.
No.
Everything was, your sea fort is a sea fort for doing sea fort things.
Yeah. I didn't realise I was doing this at the time. I realised that our town is inland, and we needed a better place to keep our boat, and there were going to be more demands on the longship as Pip goes further and further afield. And so I decided to build a sea fort, and it took me a real weekend of time and thousands of stone to build a stone structure in Valheim, which it fights you a little bit. I think its comfort zone is very much villages of stone huts, maybe protected by of wooden huts, maybe protected by a wall. And I tried to do something a little bit more kind of, I guess, more Norman than Viking.
I was going to say, you've gone a bit medieval castle, right?
Yeah, I would push it towards, like kind of like a Norman fort of some kind, like earthworks and stuff around the outside. I really enjoyed that process. It took a long time and it was very rewarding. And I think this, there was some kind of like complicated structural engineering to build a wooden superstructure inside that then had this big vaulted ceiling and things like that. But I built the whole thing, and then I realized that it was some sort of advanced form of shed craft. Like, I'd basically created a fancy garage / kind of, crafting station storage area for the boat so that I could get in the boat quickly and get out to sea, which, that is for me partly the fantasy of becoming Viking International Rescue, and also partly just the tremendous dad energy of all of that, right? Like, well, we're going to need this. We're going to need this. We're going to need a place where we can park and repair the boat. We're going to need an easy access to that northern ocean, but it's near a river that I can sail down to get to the southern ocean quickly. Very practical. You know what I mean? Like,
whereas I just leave a trail of workbenches across the world.
Yeah, and I find myself trailing, like putting tasteful surrounds around the portals and various workbenches that are kind of strewn across the world at this point.
We've got so many portals in our main town that are just marked rescue, emergency. Because they're all things that I put one portal down knowing that I would probably need to be rescued at some point, or would rescue myself. And then I take enough materials to build the other half of the portal elsewhere. But often after I've just overstretched myself is when I've removed the second part of the portal because I want to rebuild it on the other side of a bog. And then time makes fools of us all.
The thing that's wild to me about this is that what you don't do is take enough stuff, when you've got the second portal, go back through that one, get enough stuff for a third portal, build that, and only when that is built, destroy the second portal.
Yeah, no, that's not how this works, is it, Chris? That's not how I do.
The safest form of travel in Viking times is portal leapfrogging, really. Through a kind of complicated network of portals back home. But why have that when you have Viking dad longboat rescue who will kind of wearily round a corner in a longboat and paddle up and get your stuff and put it in the hold?
2 a.m. after the club and you've missed all the possible other routes home, and you phone home and you're like, hi.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
appreciate it's late. And then, a parent turns up in pyjamas, glowering but also kind of secretly pleased that you did the thing and sensibly phoned home. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't want you to keep drowning in the bog, over and over again without the longboat rescue.
But you do make me go through the specifics of how it happened.
Yeah. It's important to me to know, how did you die here?
Yeah, because there are quite a lot of how did this particular thing happen? Because
well, I think the reason, because one of the ocean bog that we're referring to is a very particular thing that can happen, where sometimes if like a small island of the swamp biome spawns, the fact that the swamp biome is like under the sea level can create this weird scenario where there is a swamp there, but it's actually under the ocean.
Yeah.
And the trees of the swamp still jut out of the ocean. And so it's a little weird. Like, it's a little weird looking. I don't know if they'll remove it as a bug that can happen or try and find a way of preventing it happening exactly like this. But this seems to create this mirage effect where you look across the sea and you can see trees. And because Valheim sometimes has some pop-in issues, you assume, well, maybe the land hasn't popped in yet.
Yeah, and when it's marked on the map, it shows you the biome, and so because it looks like an island in the water, I was swimming towards it thinking land, as you would, and then I was finding out that actually the only bit of it that was slightly above the water was about an inch around this tree that was poking up, and about 8,000 Draugr had decided that was where they were going to hang out as well. So I couldn't stop long enough to refill my stamina bar and not die horribly at sea. And then there was a giant that turned up anyway.
This phenomenon has killed Pip about 7 times. So if you ever want to know how to trap Pip, just pretend there's an island, because you do have a choice. You could have built a raft to check it out, or you could have built one of the smaller boats like a carve. But you could just swim there and find out.
I think for me, the idea of those things is just like, yeah, but that'll take an extra 3 minutes, and who's got the time?
Exactly.
But then I made you drop me off on the other side of the river rather than taking me home. But you did insist on building a safety portal before you.
It's what it is. It's like I'm gonna make sure you got bus fare. I'll drop you off, and then I'm gonna take. And then I found myself today saying I should go now while the wind's good, because it'll take some time off the time it takes for me to get the long ship home.
Oh my god!
And that is oh god, it's overwhelming.
That's peak. No, that's peak your mum.
I want to miss the 5 o'clock traffic.
Yeah.
This wind might change. I should go whoosh, and off I go back into the ocean.
Thanks for that. By the way.
Yeah, no, it's all right. It's all right. I finally, I was like, well, and you were like, should I put the kettle on before we do the podcast? Like, well, it's still going to take me at least 10 minutes to get the boat home, Pip.
It's like, well, I'm finished. I can just get a portal home. I don't know, because, you're right. We have been through several phases with the game, though. So the structuring of this was really weird to consider, so I think that's why we settled on just let's have a chat kind of thing, because at first I was feeling it out, and I think a big part of the appeal is that it's very easy to set yourself a series of little tasks that will take up an hour or take up an evening or whatever, and just keep doing that again and again, sometimes with an overarching goal in mind, but often just as a kind of, I now have the idea of the apology armour that I kind of feel like I need to make good on. And then there's also, we're kind of trolling one of our friends on the other server.
You should say who it is, because
I don't know if I want to, because I don't know when he'll realise.
Okay, and he might listen to this because he's on this podcast.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a thing to potentially look forward to. And then...
quite literally trolling as well, thinking about it.
Anyway, you've said too much. But I think that... where was I? What was I talking about?
Are changing modes of play with this game over time.
I've had that experience of just getting to grips with things and you showing me around what you and Paul had already done. And then I was finding my feet and I found that you and Paul were playing quite locally, if you see what I mean, because you both were a lot more invested in building a homestead, right? Mm-hmm. And so... when we were all on voice comms and you were like, where are you? I was like, oh, I'm in the Black Forest biome. And you're like, what?
Yeah,
you don't have enough things to protect yourself there.
We should contextualise that. You were in the Black Forest biome before having done basically anything in the game. You got dropped off by that crow at the start and just shot into the woods like a rescued fox being released by the side of a road. Just gone.
Yeah. So I enjoyed that I was able to do that or survive in that, and I had once it was clear that I kind of shouldn't have been there, I had that thrill of trying to survive slightly beyond what the game kind of thought I had, which is also how we end up with Bog Swamp Death. But I don't know, there's something about that I was really enjoying. The game has just enough friction within that and just enough danger that I enjoy tussling with it about where it thinks my limit should be currently.
Yeah.
And so I've been in that cycle at the moment. I'm not sure what's going to happen when we defeat, the final boss that's there at the moment, whether that just will fundamentally alter the relationship or whether these other tasks, that are a lot more to do with the social dynamics will take over. But I think my driving force at the moment is trying to find the runes and things that have the information on that will tell us where to find the next boss in our progression in terms of that more linear story type stuff. But that's a thing where it's taking a lot longer than the previous ones, so the cycle already feels a little bit off, and I think that's why I'm pushing so hard and have been having more of those weird in the middle of the ocean deaths. It's because I'm trying to find more forest biome that I can then try and, you know, traverse to find these informational, you know, points to then make that progress and keep that rhythm going. And I know that other people have had problems with that. I think there's a slight chance that the right stuff may not even have spawned in our world seed, and that's something that does concern me. I'm not really sure how to approach that. So at the moment, I'm content to just keep, you know, prodding, and I don't want to Google too much to look too deeply into this to find out if it's true, if it's been fixed. Well, not if it's true, but if it's been fixed, because, you know, then I might find other stuff out, or... Yeah. So I think at the moment, what's happened is I'm in this really weird position with how I'm playing, where I'm trying to find all of this stuff out for that biome, but because the gap... the amount of time it's taking has been significantly longer than the other stuff, I'm also amassing resources at that level, so I can now kind of survive in the plains, which is the 5th biome along, because we're stuck on the mountain biome, which is the snowy one. Yeah. And so now I'm kind of like straddling 2 biomes, so the plains doesn't feel like this next big thing to encounter. It's something that I can already, to some degree, survive. And so, like, I'm having a really weird relationship with the mountains, where they're no longer really worrying, or, you know, like I'm not really certain what my relationship with that is. Yeah, well, your playstyle is interesting because I think it's both. It's vulnerable to having things spoiled because it's so much about discovery and racing off to the corners of the world. And also it has that timer on it of, particularly with an early access game, you know, we've already hit this to some extent, you are going to have seen everything before too long. You know, you will. I think we are actually, to some extent, at the end of the gear tree in terms of the kinds of things we can make for ourselves now. Or getting some and some, but like there's always going to be a question of quantity or quality of stuff. But like, you know, the kind of the stuff that's swinging around weapons wise now is a far cry from where it was, you know, near the start of the game. Yeah, and that difference is so stark when I go to the other server, because I have completely separated the characters that I use on each of them. Like I don't carry over the OP armor into the Bronze Age, you know. Right, you don't show up on that server like Thor, like just no, I just steal their resources and swan around. Yes, like Thor. I built an apology cooking hall.
Where is my apology hall?
You would rearrange it. You would hate how I laid it out, and then you would... No, you're right. Yeah. Then I would want the separate apology hall. No, Exactly. There's nothing I can do beyond occasionally turning up and saying, hello, I made a sword for you. Yeah, that's always appreciated. I got an abyssal harpoon for you. You did. This is the thing. This, you know, your adventurousness has definitely been a necessary counterpoint to my very slow, just so turtle powers. Well, when we were speaking of turtles, I guess we were off on our voyage to see what was at the edge of the world, and we found that island, or looked like an island, and you were like, I wonder what that is, and before you'd really finished your sentence, I was in the sea swimming at it, and then like got my pickaxe out to see what happened if I hit it and then it went there was a certain amount of death involved then, actually. And I went back and got your stuff and took it back, and then but it's my willingness to run along and hit things that really gets us going. I think you move the window of what can be achieved. You push the boundaries. Your disruptive presence, like a startup. Drag that sea monster into the forest. You did.
I didn't like that.
No, it wasn't keen. But it was so that you could have your sea monster head in the
yeah, it's like I say, it works. I suppose like that's been part of this journey for me. Is like I had a realization. I think we have talked about this in the main CNC. I really don't like co-op most of the time. Vast majority of the time, I really don't like it. Like I'm not one of those people for whom it applies that all games are better if you play them with someone else. I don't think this is a quality of mine. I think it speaks to why I play games or what I get out of them, and maybe some just a fundamental underlying, hermitude that.
Okay, I thought maybe you were going to say, and the quality of the company is terrible.
No, it's not that, because I think there's just some part of me that like.
Because I'm delightful.
Yeah, I mean, those Draugr agree. Because I think for me, like the big appeal of like a sort of a game like this with a really nice sort of evocative world and a kind of strong atmosphere and all of these sorts of things to discover is like, it's partly immersion. Like, I think, I am very capable of giving a game the benefit of the doubt or like, yes-anding the game in my own brain to such an extent that I live there now. Right. And I can really sink into places and settings. And it's very, very difficult for me to not be shaken out of that by the presence of other people. And actually, for me, co-oping on a server for this game or for any other kind of like sandbox game is an exercise in learning to let go of the things that I lose when there are other people present. Honestly, like I want to play with my friends and I want to play with people I enjoy playing the games with. But there's all this whole bag of things that I enjoy that I lose when there are other people present, and this is like, I think this probably goes back to being a child, not to turn this into therapy momentarily, but like I will build my Lego in my way, and there's always going to be some part of me that bristles at another child going like, but what if we made this instead? And it's like, well,
you can do that with your Lego.
You do that with your Lego. I will do this with mine. And but actually, I've really enjoyed this experience partly because of the way that our divergent playstyles intersect, and also because I think it has encouraged me to find a new set of values on the other side of that, right? Like if I want that experience of things being just so, I can find a somewhat version of that by just taking myself away to a different part of the world and doing my own thing there, like the C4, which was 100%, I'm going to go do a Chris thing. Yeah. And everyone will have a look at it when it's done.
Don't come near my person marker.
Yeah, exactly. But also knowing that I could go do that on my own game if I wanted to, and I haven't really.
I had to rescue you from your own sea fort, though.
I did get stuck behind a wall without my hammer and need you to come knock a wall down so I could kind of burst.
You were so like, are you not going to replace the wall bit then when I let you out? I was like, well, no, it clearly trapped you once. Why would I reinstall this death trap?
Because it's aesthetic. And that journey was kind of interesting because I think I have found now that actually for Valheim particularly, I've really enjoyed being part of like, I don't need to be the person that sees the new biomes or the new creatures for the first time. I kind of like hearing about it from you, and I like having my own little thing to do. And I think the fact that it so much supports divergent play styles kind of loosely finding ways to live alongside each other has kind of let me into that kind of co-op thing in a way that other games don't really, that I still find difficult to handle. There have been, the moment there was definitely, and for me it's also been an exercise in learning somewhat to just let go and let things happen, because I remember
I'm waiting for the sting in the tail.
We found this when we started playing, Paul and I. We found this really lovely area. It was like a clear plain, not the plains, but like a cleared out grassland in the forests. We had the Black Forest nearby, but a random oak tree had grown in the middle of an almost circular clearing, and it was really lovely. I was like, okay, well, this is preordained. This is where we're going to build our town. Oak tree is never getting cut down. That is the center point of this little village. We'll put a ring fence around and then build a little village within this. And I had so many, like, my little, well, these are my Lego brain kicks in, and it's like, well, we shouldn't do our logging around here because the forest it's a good vibe, right? It's nice to have the forest right at the edge of the town. So I will make a path that winds out of the town to a logging area. I will build a very boutique little logging camp section with a workbench and some chests for keeping things in. We can log in a radius around there. We could also replant things. Only I did this. But also,
I never follow that path either. It's slightly windy, so I just go straight across
it is windy because it's
scenic.
aesthetic. Yeah, it's scenic and so anyway. And then in the town itself, there's this amazing thing where I was like, you know what, I've got this idea for a mead hall. I will put down a mead hall. And because I think it's quite hard to collaborate on building in Valheim, because not like literally, it's not like it doesn't work. It's because you kind of have to have a picture in your head of how you're going to intersect beams and build things and put things together. So I said to Paul, this was before you joined the server, you know, I have this idea for what would be like maybe the center hall for the town. I'm going to make a mead hall with a venting chimney and a big long fire pit that we can roast things in, and that can be our centerpiece. Why don't your building challenge be go out and build housing, like go out and put some huts down so that, you know, us and then later, you know, others can join the village. And in my head, what happened was I would build this long, impressive, traditional Viking longhouse, and Paul would go away and build a series of cute little, you know, huts and kind of interesting little, you know, he's an artist, you know, interesting little buildings around the village, and that we would have, you know, a settlement at that point. And when I emerged from my, I thought, pretty impressive hall, which was maybe, you know, 20 foot high and 40 foot long, Paul had built like a 3-story Viking block of flats next to it.
It was more of a chateau, wasn't it?
Yeah, this incredible
with a portico,
this
and
incredible like 60 foot high Viking mega mansion. And I realized at that moment that I was like, that's really cool, and my dream is dead.
You're so dramatic.
This is it. Like, and it was this thing of like, I have to let someone play with my Lego. And then I realized that no, this is just the quality of the place that we occupy now.
It's our Lego.
It is our Lego. This is the place that you know, like I imagine everything I'm saying has a big only child energy, and I'm not. I just have a sister who's extremely like me, and so I don't usually have this sort of like clash of styles thing.
You were both in your child work cubicles making Lego separately.
Yeah, basically. And so there's it was a moment of personal growth to realize like, oh no, we have like, you know, people can have intersecting styles of play, and it was really nice to see that come out through this game, particularly because the three of us on this server are so different, I think, in our approaches.
Well, you were very much, I'm going to build Viking buildings that are very close to what I understand Viking buildings to have actually been. This is not going to be a hulking great monstrous, you know, labyrinthine Winchester mystery house of a mead hall. And Paul is very much like, I am going to build this thing that is impressive and weird and cool, and I'll figure out what it's for later. And I'm very much motivated by spite. So I saw that you and Paul had beds close together, and that my bed seemed to be quite the afterthought. So I spent a lot of that part of the early game just amassing trophies and animal skins and different ways of decorating only my area of the house. I think at this point you two are both still in your straw single beds, and I have a sea monster's head above a double bed that is like absolutely littered with animal throws and covered, like I've got like a modesty screen made of different coloured pennants that hang down.
You also skipped a step here, whereas the moment you perceived your bed in the 4-story Viking block of flats to be an afterthought, you moved outside to a hut you made yourself out of two corner roof sections to create a kind of like half tent with a door that didn't open properly and a bed on the floor, and there was so little space inside it in your kind of spite.
It was a 1x2 meter
spite yurt. When the game couldn't handle you waking up inside it, and it would extrude you like a lozenge out of the back of the wall every time you got up in the morning. As you wake up,
you stand in your bed, but the ceiling was too low, so it would just sort of try and put me somewhere. And so what happens is, if I sleep in that bed, I emerge by doing essentially a roly-poly out of the back of the roof.
Yeah.
And I'm deposited outside. There's also not enough room for fire. So if I sleep with the door open, it doesn't push me out of the back. It lets me leave through the front door. But then I catch fire because I positioned the fire slightly in the wrong place. So, but I committed to sleeping in that for a good week before I went back in the house because I had a new spiteful plan.
And meanwhile, I move out to a sea fort that I meticulously build by myself because I'm surrounded by chaos people at all times who will extrude themselves out of the tent they built out of spite, catch fire, and just roll into the pig pen.
Yeah. But I'm also the reason we have a pig pen.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm also the reason that we now no longer have pigs in the pig pen. There was a dragon-based incident, and I don't want to talk about it. And I'm the reason that we have a dog.
Yes, you are. We did. Like that was a good example of co-op. I think you figured out how it was going to work. We built the place. We tamed the dog. He was very angry.
He was so angry for so long.
And then it was me that walked the dog about 8 miles all the way to get into the stone castle I built the dog so that he could never be endangered by anything ever again.
Yeah.
Some call it a prison, but
you are now so afraid. Like, I'm afraid to do anything but feed it because I don't want to be the one that's responsible for having to tell you that the dog is gone.
We take a backup of the server every night at 4 a.m. and I have told you and Paul, and I stick to this, if anything happens to the dog, I'm rewinding time.
But yeah, that's why I feed the dog before I feed myself, which is how I get into these scrapes.
Again, it's my fault for caring.
It's your fault for caring more about the dog than about your fellow Pip.
You are responsible for eating enough to survive the sea bog.
I've absolutely proven I'm not.
Well, you are responsible. Should you be? Another question.
Yes, well.
And the dog is fine, I think.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
So that's all right then.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
But yeah, so that's where that's at, I think. I don't think there was also the point in our evolution with the game where I was getting quite a lot further than you and Paul, so I built that was cool actually, because under the house I hollowed out a whole section because how Paul builds houses, there was a whole under cupboard storage under the stairs area that no one was using for anything, so I actually hollowed out the ground underneath it and built a little stairway down to a basement where we have now a kind of hell portal to my summer cabin where I store all of my advanced materials and a head collection. And so, yeah, that was a thing that you didn't find for quite a while.
Yes, I know. That was like going downstairs and finding the portal to Pip's secret home. That was a special moment.
Yeah, but it was because I didn't want you to find out extra things, because I think this was when you weren't quite sure how you felt about spoilers or about like how much I was sort of bringing each time you logged in, because you were playing at a very different cadence. Like I was spending quite a lot of time, and so you would turn up and I'd be like, hello, I found this and this, pick it all up, so you've got this influx of recipes that you have no idea what to do with or where they live.
Yeah, that was quite overwhelming at first.
Yeah, and so I started just keeping all of that stuff separately so that you could encounter it like as and when, or like at a more measured pace. So yeah, there was just kind of like this weird chalet treasure box of obsidian and silver and, tools and things. That was... I think the most co-op-y we've been is on our ocean voyages.
And the boss fights was the other thing I was going to say.
That's true.
I have enjoyed the boss fights. I think it has a really good line in spectacle when it comes to throwing something kind of surprising and new at you and asking you to deal with it. I think it'll be interesting to see if they can keep that level of surprise up, I think. But it is a really good journey to go on. when you start encountering those, and then coming together as a server to kind of take on those monsters, particularly the most recent one we did, the Bone Mass, kind of does seem to encourage you to use all the different skills, that you develop doing different things.
Yeah, no, that was good, actually.
Including my project management and dad powers. I don't think you can do this. I think we need to go home and get better arrows.
Well, no, because I was saying about the arrows, you wanted to build like an actual arena to have the fight in a sensible fashion.
Yeah.
And I was just trailing monsters around the swamp. Like a conga line. And you were like, this is not sustainable. And we were both right.
We were both right.
But yeah, so I think that's... I don't know. I'm glad that other games are on my horizon for like the next leg of Valheim's early access, I think, because so the Subnautica Below Zero, I believe that leaves early access on the 14th of May. And so that will, given previous precedent with Subnautica 1, I fully expect to lose a significant chunk of time to exploring that and mining that out and making weird bases or, whatever that game facilitates. And so I think it will be nice to take a break while updates for Valheim maybe pile up a little bit, because it's you're right, we are definitely at the point of the game where we are feeling the limits of it. We're not running up against them exactly, because we still have these two biomes that we haven't fully dealt with, but we are able to see the parts of it that are clear, construction in progress kind of signs.
I feel like I've done all of the loops that are currently present, if that makes sense. I don't think there's much. Maybe there is. Maybe there'll be some more surprises, but
I think that given what I have found in the plains, that's something that to me indicates that there's a chunk of stuff that I still want to see.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess when I talk about loops, what I mean is sort of like what my gameplay experience is likely to be. Like what am I likely to kind of like feel like, be surprised is present. Because I remember being, an example I would give you is, I remember being surprised to discover really dungeon-feeling dungeons for the first time in a game that didn't otherwise, gesture at having them. Then these boss fights, and then I feel like I've hit all of its main verbs now.
Right.
And its main verbs now are get Discord message from Pip, log in, get boat, go to where Pip is, pick up Pip, ask Pip where body is, sail to bog.
Where did you leave your keys?
Yeah, catch favourable wind, sail home. And so, but that I quite enjoyed. Like, similarly, I think with a game like this in early access, there's that, it feels like at some point we need to be ready for there to potentially be a reset, or, for an update to invalidate our progress so far. And so I'm not in a hurry to build like a bigger, more spectacular fort than the one I've already built, because I might want to do that one day, but it might be worth waiting until I do that as part of a new content set or a new seed or something like that. I feel like, and that's the thing, is I feel like my playstyle as the kind of builder / support person is more vulnerable to over-investing in something that I lose in some ways than yours is, because even if you would, even if we had to start again tomorrow, you would have to fight through a bit of stuff you're very familiar with to find something new, but your playstyle will still allow you to fling yourself into dangerous situations and kind of have fun doing that and rocket along the path and use all the knowledge you've got. Whereas mine will necessitate like a whole bunch of resource gathering before I can get back to the point where I am. And so that's an interesting tension, I think. I was going to ask, actually, maybe to start wrapping this up as well, like, what sort of things do you want to see them add or change or do? Because often you hit something with Valheim, I find, where like something will feel a little bit rough or unfinished, and then it's been pleasant. I think we've hit a really good balance of when you hit those moments, it's pleasant that it's in early access because it's a really good game.
Yeah.
With this understanding that it's not finished, as opposed to being an obviously unfinished game with the understanding that one day maybe it'll be good.
Yeah, I think that's something that I have deliberately not really thought about, because I think such a large part of the game is about being delighted by finding these surprises. I think I've been doing that thing where, you know, when we're watching TV sometimes and you're like, I'm going to make a prediction about what happens. And I watch while deliberately suspending that part of my brain. So even if it was signposted from the get-go, I can still feel legitimately surprised, even if it's only a tiny bit, or like, you know, there's something there that I have the ability to switch off a little bit more than I think other people do when they play in some play styles. So yeah, I think something I'd like to see explored a bit more is to do with the food side of things, just because the raspberries and the blueberries, I'd like to be able to do a bit more with that, you know, like to make a pie or, you know, that kind of thing. And that might be possible later because I've found some barley and things, you know, maybe that's something that I would be able to do with if I can get some different materials to make cooking implements or something. I have no idea if that's in the game and I'm deliberately not looking, but it's I think that side of things, because I like how the game handles food and stamina and health and the interrelationship of those things. Like, so just in case people are listening and don't know, you can eat up to 3 different types of food. You can only eat 1 of each different type. You can't duplicate food, otherwise it says, you've had enough sausages. And it's like, well,
I will be the judge of that.
Yeah, exactly. You can't eat any more sausages. Like, well, I beg to differ. But, so as you progress, you obviously get, or not obviously, but you get access to more complicated recipes or things that require cultivation or more advanced ingredients. And those tend to be, they give you a bigger boost to your health bar. So essentially you have basically 25, I think, health. And then these snacks can boost that by a certain amount, and then it starts ticking down over time, and then you can refill it when you get hungry again, and that is then tied to your stamina somehow. I forget quite how, because your stamina is also affected by things like rest.
It also depends on the food
and your skill
itself.
And but like there are interrelationships there that are cool, and I like how it does those things. Like I feel quite I like, even though I'm doing a poor job of explaining it right now, it's something that is surprisingly intuitive, and to me doesn't feel like that usual survival game grind of you are hungry, you are thirsty, you know, please refill these bars for no good reason. It's literally, well, if you have more health, you can survive this thing for long, and then if you run out of stamina, it won't be as disastrous when you're swimming across a river, you know, because you then, so you run out of stamina, you start chewing through your health. And so if you have eaten serpent stew, and if you have eaten some sausages, and if you have eaten some carrot soup or something, you know, like that combo,
you'll dive even deeper into the bog.
That combo will let you perhaps make it to the far shore, instead of, you know, some really tiny energy increments, or health increments rather, that would come from, you know, just a simple
foraged mushroom.
Yeah, like if you had a mushroom, if you had one cooked tail of a reptile and a blueberry, you know?
Yeah, it's just not a meal.
So yeah, that's what I would like. How about you?
There's 2 things I really want. I really want to be able to treat wood so that it becomes resilient to the rain. Because I think they obviously have this thing of, and this is where you hit the limits, like they really want you to put everything under a roof block, and anything under a roof block is immune to rain damage, basically. But I think that's quite limiting in terms of how creative you can be, and also in terms of the kinds of architecture you can represent. It's fine if it's just longhouses and huts all day, but you don't want to have to cover everything in a thatched roof. And so, you know, you have to either then use stone for everything, which, you know, is maybe the vibe you're going for. So, you know, if you have like exposed wooden planking or flooring outside, it just degrades, and it degrades really fast. So I want to be able to use resin to like seal it or something like that, or wax maybe from the beehives, or, you know.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Like have some way of making treatable wood That would be thing one. Thing two is I really like the sailing model in Valheim. It feels like it's not realistic, but there are things about it that feel very kind of familiar to steering rowboats around. But it's interesting coming to Valheim from Sea of Thieves, which is also a game that we played a bunch of. Sea of Thieves is quite forgiving with the wind. Like going into the wind in Sea of Thieves, it just sort of fakes it for you a little bit. Like in terms of like, you'll be fine. You're going directly into the wind, it's fine. It's fine. They take the approach of like they reward you for going with the wind if that's what you want, but they don't punish you too much for going against the wind if you're determined to go somewhere. That's completely appropriate to that game because. It's going to tell you, find this island. You're already doing a bunch of work to figure out where you should go a lot of the time. They don't want to also punish you for the fact that it might be in a direction that, for reasons you can't control, is going to be a pain in the ass to sail in. Valheim doesn't do that. The wind's really important to sailing, and it can be quite precocious. And going into the wind kind of sucks because it puts you down to just paddling on the slowest speed setting until you can turn into the wind. It's not even really possible to tack. And so I would really like them to add craftable oars that let people sit in the boats and row, particularly when the wind is low.
Yeah.
That would be cool. I would really like that because I think, and this is stuff that like, those restrictions, I believe on the main pod, people talked about ocean voyages in Valheim and how they feel, and they do feel great. And one of the reasons they feel great is that they can be an ordeal sometimes, and they can be long and grueling, and you've got to listen to that one horn on the soundtrack that plays when you're at sea that sort of mournfully wails all of the fucking time. Like, it's you, your friends, and a single lonely horn person just tooting away.
Track is slightly intrusive in a way that the land-based stuff really
isn't. Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I don't think they anticipated getting into the position that one solo is in of it just recurring. And you can switch it off, obviously, but yeah, like I think there is. It feels like one of those things, and it's ever the tension with sandbox games, and it's really hard to navigate of making sure that you give players meaningful ways to reduce the inconvenience that they encounter, the meaningful inconvenience they encounter as they try to get to grips with the systems and survival generally. Give them ways to reduce that inconvenience without taking away some of the fun of hitting challenges. And so I would love to see them address that with sailing a little bit to make it more, to give you options for when you really need to go somewhere to rescue Pip from a bog, but the wind is against you.
I think as a slight add-on to that, what I would like for the sailing is for it to just be slightly more clear or, not exactly intuitive. I'm okay with it being something I have to learn, but there are things like if you're sailing along and it's like you've just hit something and I can't reliably tell whether that's like a piece of ground that hasn't popped in yet, or whether it's just wear and tear of being in the ocean, or whether it means
you came down off a particularly big wave.
Yeah, like I find it quite hard to work out what worrying noises at sea mean. And also there are things like sometimes when I'm pressing the buttons to raise or lower the sail or whatever, I can't work out exactly why sometimes the entire sail will turn, why the entire mast suddenly does a 180, and I'm like, hang on, how do I get that back? And then pressing the opposite button doesn't seem to reliably do that. So I think there's things like that where just I'm okay with learning it, but the info doesn't feel like a thing that I can get from the game. That feels like a thing where I'm going to need to read what someone has said, and they're like, this happens because this, and then that happens, or you need to have done it in this order, or
I think I'm fairly comfortable with that stuff with the boats now. It's just the kind of environmental inconvenience. Other than that, it's just going to be really exciting to see where it goes, because I think it's definitely one of the...
Well, if it's this good this far, like this it's, at this point,
I admire it a lot what they've managed to achieve, like with a relatively narrow scope, and like how successfully it evokes the fantasy that it evokes. Yeah, good for you, Valheim. We've had a good time, Heim. Yeah, in Valheim. Speaking of Heim, I think that might be all of the Valheim, take Heim, time Heim. We have Heim.
I think I'm done, Heim. I don't have anything else to contribute, Heim. Sorry.
If some listening devices on this is going to play havoc with my Spotify algorithm more than anything else, I suspect. Yeah, great. Well, thank you for listening, Heim, to this one-off little Valheim special pod.
Listeners will not know this, but he did roll his eyes at the most recent Heim. Like, you've adopted this.
Well, sometimes you just got to, yes, Heim, I guess.
Yes, and Heim.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that we have. Maybe we will do another one at some point when we have got a bunch more to report on, or if they make any.
I wouldn't be like I'm not
changes.
I'm not in a hurry to promise that this would be a series necessarily, but I suspect it's a game that we will return to and then naturally kind of want to talk about the continued bog deaths of Philippa War.
Oh no. I need to accumulate some more crimes before we before court reconvenes.
Yeah. I don't think that's how court works, but let's not litigate that now.
Interesting. Well, anyway. Shall we go and
shall we say
get
goodbye?
My corpse back. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, that's what we say.
Heim.
Bye.
Bime.